My guest today mixes crazy, complex stuff with humor. And no, he's not Frank Zappa. His band Standards is just him and a drummer, and that leaves a lot of space for creativity. Early this year, he wrote a message on socials saying that he often thought of throwing the towel, thinking who even cares? Well, I do, and hopefully listeners of this podcast as well. Welcome to this episode, Marcus Mena from Standards.
Thanks for having me, dude.
Thank you. How are you doing, Marcus?
Good. We're in my house, which is nice. Usually if we do face-to-face interview, it's not in my house. I'm traveling. So this is really rare. You're traveling. You're the one traveling.
Yes. I prefer doing this face-to-face interviews. It's so much better. And I get to see people's houses.
Yeah, that's true. Well, today we're in this is where we eat. So you can all see where I eat.
Yeah. Hey, I mentioned that message of yours saying you cast a little bit of doubt, right? Why am I doing this? And who even cares? Can you explain why you wrote that?
Yeah, the bigger context is that, we get every band, any artist on Spotify, you get all the numbers at the end of the year. So it's just really cool because for me, I had for a long time, nobody listened to my music. As I'm sure a lot of people can relate. It's really hard to get people to listen to your music nowadays, or just in general, just to get any sort of art out there is so much of it and so saturated. But I felt very fortunate that a lot of people were engaging and continue to engage, even if we don't post something, in our band profiles or whatever. So, it's moments like those where you look back, and now the band I play in, Standards, is we're 7 years almost. That's for me a long time. For some people it's not a long time, but I think that's a substantial amount of time.
Well, so you told me you're 27, right?
I'm 27.
So that's a substantial time of your life.
Yeah, almost all my 20s. So you do look back and reflect, and then social media makes it now where I think everything is kind of a bit of a comparison, even if you don't want it to be. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to not make everything a comparison. You can see my peer, he did this thing, or this person got this tour, and it's all apples and oranges, right? Some comparisons are not favorable. There is no one-to-one comparison. Mm-hmm. Everybody really is their own artist, but I think by doing what you're supposed to do these days, which is be on social media, be online, you're always comparing yourself, and it forces you to compare yourself because you see likes, you see all these things, and sometimes, I, like a lot of people I'm sure can also relate, you get caught up in that minutia, and so you have moments where you're like, why bother? This guy is getting 10,000 likes on his stuff. His stuff is great, but you could compare it to record sales back in the day. Maybe a band, like you said, Frank Zappa, maybe his record sales weren't the best compared to someone else in that era with 70s, maybe Clapton. Mm-hmm. But it's two different things, right? They both play guitar, but that's kind of where the similarities end. They're very different guitar players. And there's fans of Frank Zappa that are never going to listen to Clapton, and vice versa. So there's always that. And I think that's part of accepting being an artist. Mm-hmm. So I hope that gives a little bit of context. But no, I would never quit. I think it's just more of every artist, I think, needs at some point to step away from the social media game, from the numbers game, because otherwise that's a dark path.
But it's hard to because you lose track of the goal sometimes, right? For instance, I can relate to that. This podcast for me is, I started because I really like doing this, right?
Of course.
And that's the goal. But I also get stuck on how many people are listening.
Yeah.
And so how do you get back to the goal? What makes you go back there mentally?
I think what you said is that's the total right answer. You have to want some, if you do something just because you're I want to be famous, or I want, 10,000 likes. I have friends of mine, and they're also trying to build a following, and they're my goal is 10,000 monthly listeners on Spotify. But it's well, I don't know. For me, whenever I hit a numbers goal, and sometimes it'll, I'm sure everyone can also maybe relate to this, but if you play a video game, and it's I need, 10,000 in-game currencies to get this item. Once you get it, it's like your life doesn't really change that much. I think you could see that also with people that get wealthy. Maybe someone's goal is like, oh, I need $1 million.
Yeah.
Making $1 million, you'd be surprised, it's not going to make you that happy. Like,
No.
then you're like, oh, I need a new goal now, $2 million now.
Yeah.
So I think the goal should always be do what is like your next step. What's your next evolution as an artist? What's, and like you said, like, do you enjoy it? Because I think if you don't enjoy it, that's a big reason to say, okay, maybe now I shouldn't do this. But that's my next goal, is just seeing where we can take the band, where I can take my guitar playing. And as of right now, I feel like I'm like successfully on the next evolution of that. But yeah, there are moments where you have a week where you don't play a lot, or you're trying to play and it's just not clicking, and those are moments of doubt. But I think if you don't have those, then you're not really engaging with art, right? Like that's part of it.
Yeah. But like you said, you have to really want. I remember one video you shared as well. Like, there was a concert where nobody showed up, right?
Oh no, that was a joke.
Oh, it was a joke.
No, it was a venue in Phoenix, Arizona, and they have 2 rooms.
Yeah.
So we were playing the smaller room, and people did show up. Like it was like half sold.
I was like, oh no, is this real?
No. But the other room, the band had canceled. And because it was the bigger room, we asked them like, hey, can we go in there and play for a bit? And they're like, yeah, no problem. So we took all of our stuff and we filmed a quick video, and we just thought it would be funny. Like when the video ends, you look in the crowd and there's literally nobody. And so the room was dark. They even turned the lights on for the video. So they were in on it. But it was pretty funny.
Yeah, you caught me, man. Sorry.
No, well, so I think from a business side, for anyone listening, or if you want to know, if nobody buys a ticket, or if like 6 people buy a ticket, they're just going to cancel, right? And that's also a thing you see nowadays. Like artists will say, "Oh, I need to spend more time with my family," or "Oh, I like my stomach hurts." It's like, nah, dude, it's not true. Like most of the time, 70% of the time, maybe not the health thing, but tickets, they just didn't sell enough tickets. And yeah, so we would have just canceled, and we probably would have said something like that, like, oh, but I ate something bad, or
but it was a good joke though.
It was very funny. Yeah. A lot of people were also fooled, so you're not the only one.
Hey, you mentioned your guitar playing, and where it's gonna take you. I want to take us in this conversation back, like to the first time you picked up a guitar.
Okay,
tell me.
I played music since I was 5. I played piano, but it was more of like a extracurricular thing versus like a passion. So my parents were big believers that you should be able to do a lot of things. Like my mom is from New York, so a lot of how she was raised is that you have a very busy schedule, and it's a bit out here as well, but I think it's a little.
Here we're in Long Beach.
Yeah, so we're in California. So the West Coast versus East Coast, there's a bit of West Coast people are a little more relaxed. I think it's a little more, but in New York, where she's from, it's very much more like go, like rush, sort of thing. Especially when it comes to children, the way that she was raised, is that you're doing like every hour you have a new activity. And I've met kids or I even talk kids they also have that, where guitar is like one of 12 things that they're doing. But she just wanted me to have a musical thing that I could do. Like it was kind of like, okay, you're going to do an art form, you're going to do a sport, you're going to do one of everything, and then you're going to be good at all of them, and then you're going to have good grades, and then you're going to go to a good school. And that was kind of the mentality.
And what was that? How did that feel for you as a kid? Because some kids go really good at that, right? I mean,
yeah. Well, I didn't mind, because I saw piano as like, oh, it's just like playing soccer, or it's just like a thing I do. But I don't love it. You know what I mean? But you don't have to love it. Like I think that like fitting in that goal, right? But I played piano, and then I played violin, and I really didn't like the violin because it's a very hard instrument, especially for children to learn. I think that's an instrument you really have to love, because it's really hard. You got to put a lot of time into your technique and all this stuff. So it wasn't until I really actually wanted to play guitar when I was like 11. So that was when I went into like middle school. I don't know what the translation would be, between your, I guess, lower schools, what maybe.
Yeah, it's a different system than in Europe. But
I was 11. So
yeah.
I had just entered, it would be 11, 12, 13-year-olds. So you're entering your teenage years. And so I was like, I do like playing music, but I didn't like how I was playing music, especially like just some of the, stuff that I was learning. And also at the time, like I didn't really listen to a lot of music. So you hear like a famous musician, they'll say like, oh, like I just went through my parents' record collection, or my dad always played the Stones. Like I didn't know what the Rolling Stones sounded like. I didn't know any bands. I think.
So was there no music in your house?
No, I think it was more so that we would listen to like Mozart, or it's just like but it was not like something that was always on. It was like, oh, now we're going to actively engage in listening to music, and we're going to listen to like classical music, or we're going to listen to sometimes we'd listen to like the Beach Boys or something. So when I was 11, like I got internet access, and your friends also have internet access, so they're like,
what
"Hey,
is
hey." So it's a curse.
Yes, it's mainly a curse.
Yeah.
Right? Oh man. Sorry.
No, but like I can't remember the first real bands that I was listening to, but among the earlier ones, like when I got my first guitar, I got a. It was like not even an acoustic. It was like a classical guitar. So my mom was like, oh yeah, you're going to play classical. And I never learned classical guitar, but the first riff I played was Crazy Train. And I could already do that because I had been playing violin and piano for so long. It didn't really seem that hard.
So your ear was kind of trained as well.
Yeah, I didn't even know what a tab was, but I could hear it. I figured out the notes. And it's a short riff anyway, so it wasn't too hard to figure out. But there were so many things about the guitar. I was like, whoa, so you can do this. And then when I got an electric guitar when I was 12, that's when I really started to see more, because I had gotten into like some more heavy metal, as well as like, a lot of bands that younger people like Green Day and Blink-182. So I was like exploring metal, exploring pop punk. And then that's when my mom especially, she was like, okay, we've deviated from the script. You were supposed to be this like classical, but she let me do it. She just wasn't so enthusiastic about it being like a thing I was going to do full time. And
what did it mean for you back then, the guitar? Because it must have been a satisfying feeling as well. Like, okay, I can figure out music I really like, and the spark must have been there, right?
Yeah, I mean, the guitar was everything for me at that point, because I really felt connected to the culture, like the rock and roll culture. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. Like going on tour, that was something that I was like, whoa, that's like the best job ever. Like you get
I'll ask you later on, is it?
Well, I think it's a scope, right? Because when I was 12, I got really into Avenged Sevenfold, if you're familiar. Yeah, really into them, because for me, they had everything, because it's a bit proggy, right? Like just a bit, like they have a bit of that Oingo Boingo, less now, but around the time that I was listening, there was a bit more of that. They also had a drummer at the time named The Rev, and he was like amazing, really great metal drummer. And so you had that, you had Sinister Gates guitar shredding, like, and then that's not all he did too. He also did like a lot of like classical stuff too. So I just felt very great connection to that band. And they even put out a special where they played live in Long Beach. Of course, I missed it because it was like in 2009 or something. But I was like, wow, they came to Long Beach, and they played at the arena, and they had this huge show. And I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. Like this is the best thing ever. So, and of course, like I could bring my guitar to school because I played in the jazz band. So I was able to get enough guitar tutoring to where I was able to play jazz. So, just I got to a level where I could play comfortably like minor sevenths, major.
What were your early teachers like? Did they understand like, okay, this kid maybe wants more than just a minor 7 chord?
Well, I think my mom was cautious to go all in on this because she didn't understand the potential in it, and also that it was not impressive. She felt that it was not as impressive as somebody who could like really play guitar or classical guitar or play violin, like that was an esteemed thing to do, like classical music. Whereas like if you play rock music or whatever, that's not as impressive to maybe institutions of higher learning or to extended relatives or people that just for my overall future, maybe that wasn't a good idea. But I was able to get enough tutoring to go into jazz band. So at first I did group lessons, which was terrible because I felt already that I could do something. The chords were a bit tougher because I'd never done something like that. But as far as like playing, like picking and all this stuff, I was like, oh, this is no problem. So eventually, but it was like my teacher just kind of laying it out for my mom, being like, hey, Marcos can be in the jazz band next year, but he needs to take jazz guitar lessons. It's like more of a special thing. So, I took lessons here in Long Beach at a place called Gilmore Music. It's still open, but it's no longer a music shop. They just do rehearsal rental. But at the time, it was like a one-stop shop. So they had like a recording studio. They had instruments, and they even did in-house instruments. So they would kind of like do their own Strat copies. And I actually own one, not here, but it was really like its own thing. And how it kind of really made money was instrument rentals. So that's how we were able to get in there, is because every year we'd rent, violin for the year, for the school year.
Mm-hmm.
So they would rent out instruments. So I would go there, and then of course it was awesome for me because I could try.
Back then you were how old?
I was 12 years old.
12.
Yeah, I would have been, maybe 11, 12 years old. Yeah. So my mom saw the jazz guitar thing as like, okay, this is like guitar, but it's not totally like this trashy, because she viewed it as like this outsider culture with like tattoos and piercings and like heroin, or like, I don't know if it needs to be censored, but like drug use. Like, this is like, no, like this is not going to happen in my house. So she was okay with that, but I loved going there because I could try like all the classic guitar pedals, like first time I tried like the Boss Metal Zone, I was like, dude, this is like the best pedal ever. Like, So,
but it seems like that you needed to get a little bit from underneath her wings to because you do have tattoos now, right? Heroin, I don't know.
Well, yeah.
Probably not.
Well, we have time, right? I can kind of go through the story, I guess. But this is the early days, and also, kids, it's like, you don't know if they say they like something and then maybe they completely change, right? So my mom was also testing the water with that. Like, okay, why don't you do this? And so I took lessons there from a guy. His name was Jimmy Cheeseman. I only remember that because it's such a funny name. Yeah, but he taught me like blues, taught me jazz. We learned Hideaway. It's like I can't remember the guitarist now. I feel really bad. But I thought that was like the greatest song ever. John Lee Hooker. Like I started playing that, and I was like, whoa, okay, this is really, so, we were doing metal, then it was rock, then it was blues, and then a bit of jazz. I didn't really understand the whole improvisation thing, I still don't, but like, I liked jazz, but I think also it was, there were certain elements of it that I was like, this doesn't really groove hard enough. Like I liked blues because even though you got like a clean guitar and stuff, it's really emotional, and some songs are like really driving. Like you listen to like Boom Boom by John Lee Hooker, and when the hits come in, because it's like a trade off. So it goes boom boom, and the hits come in, and it feels very heavy. It's very emotional, and so I was like super hooked at that point. And I auditioned and I got into the jazz band at school. So then I was able to bring my guitar to school because of jazz band. And when I carried my guitar around, I was also able to play in between. And from being in, sixth grade when I was 11 years old, I was like, I wear like button up shirt, school uniform thing. Like I have short hair, like it was very, very nerdy. Then once I got the guitar, it was like, now people wanted to talk to me. Now girls wanted to talk to me now. And I liked it. It wasn't even just a prop. It was something that I genuinely liked to do. So it completely changed everything.
So you got liked for being you.
Yeah, I felt so. Yeah. And I think also that's an age where it's harder to make friends. Like everyone's friends when you have kids. You can be friends with anybody, right? Like they have friends. But then obviously as you get older, it's like, okay, well, now we're actually making friends based on certain things. So I still had a lot of friends from elementary school. So this would be like, just after kindergarten, age 6 to 11. But after that, it was like, okay, now I want to be friends with kids that like metal. I want to be friends with kids that like rock. So my friend group started changing too. And then it was like, all right, let's make a band. And then it was apparent to me how impossible that was. It was like, I got to find 3 other kids that are like as into this as me. And we need a drummer too. That's like so hard to find a good drummer.
Drummer chapter, that we'll touch that later.
Yeah. But yeah, it was like, from that point on, I was just like, this is the best thing. And that's when my mom started being like, oh, okay, this is not, you're spending all your time on this. And that's also when my grades started to way down. Yeah, because I wasn't interested in it, man. Like, something that it took me a while to figure out was it's really hard for me to. I feel like I actually do have a penchant for excelling in things. I think that's really something that I'm proud of myself. I feel like if I go all in, I can do well for myself. But it was so hard for me. And the culture that I was in the school system, people were already from grade 8. Here we have a test called the SATs.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very important test for college. They were already studying for this. This was like 3 years away.
Wow.
And that was the culture. It was like you need to do this, because if you don't pass this, then you're not going to get this, then you're not going to get that, and then you're not going to go to a good college, and then your whole life is going to be
killer for creativity, right?
Killer for creativity, killer for just overall mindset, because it's like that'll happen sometimes, by the way, because we live here.
I'll AI it out.
We're in a real city now, so this is but yeah, it was tough for me, because it was like I just felt like a screw up at some point, because once I started failing classes or I was not doing well, then it was like, okay, now we have to have the school meeting. Okay, Marcos, if you mess up this, and this isn't gonna go well. This isn't gonna go well. And already they were doing class placements. So like from 12 years old on, it was like if you didn't do well in this class, you wouldn't get placed in this higher learning class. So then you wouldn't get placed in another higher learning class. So you wouldn't get placed in college level classes in high school. So you wouldn't get college level credits. So you wouldn't be able to finish college. Do you see what I mean? It's like a chain, all based on what you were doing at 12 and 13 years old. That would affect what college you're going to.
That's really tough mindset to have on such a young age, right?
Yeah, and then it's both of my parents. They're art lovers, but also they're academics. Both of them worked in the newspaper industry. They're very high up in what they did. My mom was a reporter for the LA Times, which is pretty big newspaper, or was. I don't know if it's still, I don't know.
I know the name.
It was a big deal, and my father did Spanish print, so he worked at 2 big Spanish newspapers, but they were very worldly. Like my mom's favorite game is Scrabble, and she's killer Scrabble player, like amazing wordsmith. And yeah, my father's like absolutely brilliant, like more brilliant than all of us, you know what I mean? So it's like that was kind of the household. And so for me to come in with this, rock music attitude, it was very much like a hostile sort of thing. And it was, it definitely compounded. So as my penchant for like guitar and like being in a band and like music grew, everything else started to decline like very badly. And that all came to a head when I entered high school. So I was able to get into what's called a magnet program. And that is, those are programs in high school that are available for kids that want to fast track college. Like they want to do STEM, they want to do, careers in politics. It's for people that are looking to get higher levels of education. So already, I'm 14 years old. I've gotten into this somehow. Possibly, I will say it was like a race related thing. So I'm half Hispanic, half Jewish. So I think they saw that and they're like, okay, we can get a little diversity, in this kind of class. But my grades were not the best, but it was okay for the time being. And that's where it really started to go downhill, because my first year, I'm 14 years old, I had physics class, Chinese, geometry, like this was hardcore, and so I already didn't have good study habits. This was not going to help. Like I thought, I'll just memorize these Chinese characters like 10 minutes before the test. No, dude, you had to be like in there. It's a tough language to learn at any age, and especially like in a public school setting, it's like impossible. So every year it was just like a battle just to stay in that program. My mom was like, he has to stay in this program. And then
but in the meantime, the guitar was
my guitar. Yeah. Well, every year I was in a new band. I'd meeting new friends. I would make breakthroughs for myself, like teaching myself how to record.
Did you see it or feel it as 2 worlds, right? I have the guitar, the thing that I really want. And okay, I have the things that I expected to do.
Yeah. And it was killing me, man. Like it was like, and it felt like I was doing two jobs at once, because I would go to school, I'd get myself there, and then I'd have like Spotify wasn't really a thing yet, so I would just download lots and lots of music. So I'd just be like cycling through, like, The Devil Wears Prada has a new album out. I need to run that back and forth, and also just paying attention to song structures, like what are the drums doing? I'm trying to teach myself production. I'm trying to ascertain this. That's my walk to school.
So you were tough on yourself then.
Yeah, well, because I felt like and again, like I would try to meet other kids but I could rarely ever find kids that were as interested as me. You know, they were interested, but then I'd start talking more and more, and then it felt like we were in two different leagues. And that's not to be pretentious, but like I get very obsessive with things, and I was obsessive with the guitar. Then I got obsessive with production and all this stuff. So I was just like, you know, yeah, you'd go to school, and then between classes, I even download like audio recording podcasts. Like I was like really, really invested. And then I also was in jazz band in high school, and that's when I would also practice. So I would be practicing, learning some new songs, whatever, writing riffs for my band, and then I'd have to learn the jazz band thing. And then I was writing solos because I'm a terrible improvisation, so I would make solos or whatever. And yeah, there were some breakthroughs. Like I had some teachers, you know, even teachers that didn't teach music, and they would see this and they would give me a little bit of, you know, validation, and that felt really good because it was like, you know, I had my chemistry teacher come to one of my shows. You know, he just came to support me.
Nice.
Yeah, but he was like, "You're really doing something here. Like, you're going to be something special."
Wow.
But like, he was the only one. Like, my math teacher hated me. He's like, "Hey, you failed this class. Like, if you fail again, you're not going to graduate. Like, stop fucking around. Like, take out your earplugs." You know, like I was listening to music in class once in like history class, and I was just so bored. I was like, I don't even want to be here, man. And I was listening to music, and a teacher came up to me and like ripped my earbuds out.
Wow.
And she's like, yeah, she just like dressed me down in front of everyone. And yeah, maybe for good reason, but also like, dude, I really didn't want to be there, you know? Yeah. But you know, it got better, like, especially when it was like, okay, I'm going to graduate high school, I'm going to be able to go to college. Then teachers were a bit, you know, lenient. I'll never forget my English teacher. You know, I saw my grade get a bump. So we would have like online grades, and I could see kind of where the grades were at. And my English teacher had given me extra credit. And I was like, I didn't turn in any extra credit. And the previous week I had, you were allowed to perform in front of everybody. So me and my friend, it was kind of like a proto standards. It was like me and another drummer. And we went up there and we did like Hendrix, we did like surf rock, we did, you know, Mr. Lou, we did like a bunch of just guitar tracks.
Yeah.
So we did Purple Haze, and he was English, and he said, "I heard your version of Purple Haze, and I thought it was incredible." Oh wow! And I that's why I gave you the extra credit for English class. Yeah, can you believe that? Like, I'll never forget that.
Yeah, but the role of a teacher, you'd mentioned the chemistry teacher showing up. If you're a teacher, you're not just there to give information, right? You're there also to, I don't know, shape somebody's personality, right, and feel comfortable and. If that's what you remember after 10 years or so,
right?
That guy showed up and that did something with your confidence. That's what he taught you, not just numbers and all, right?
Well, so, we're sitting here and we're looking at it from the bird's eye view.
Yes,
but you know, the truth is the system. You know, a teacher's job is to get kids to pass tests.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. You want to have your grades high. You also, a lot of the teachers, their job in that program was to prepare kids for AP classes, which are college level classes. So yeah, you have that maybe like more of what a teacher should be. And then I had also a lot of teachers that they didn't care. They didn't care about you. You were a face in a seat, and you needed to get a certain test score. And all you need to do is remember the information that's taught this week, regurgitate it on a test. And that was the system. I saw that as the system, and I was like anti that system. And I was like, I'm not a part of that system. You know, I'm doing my own thing, and I don't care about this test, or, you know, it didn't matter to me.
So there was this early standards going on. You and the drummer, you mentioned, I find it very hard to find 3 or 4 kindred spirits. Was that the reason why you just thought, okay, just me and the drummer, that will do?
Yeah, well, I had a couple bands. I tried metal for a while. Now I feel like metal bands, it's kind of hard to do because you got to get people that can play loud, that can play fast, you know. And like metal, it sounds so bad if it's like not everyone's on the same page. Like I think with like blues, you can kind of, I don't know, some other genres, I feel like you can get away with it. Punk, definitely you can get away with it. But we were trying to do like this tight metalcore thing. Like that was really big in 2010s. Was like Warped Tour. You know, bands that are doing like open chugs in synchronicity. So I was like, okay, once I was over that, I was like, okay, I'm never doing that again, because that was just too hard. Like it was too much going on. So Yeah, I found another drummer named Evan, and he was amazing. Like for his age, he was a year younger than me. Still a great drummer. He still plays actually around, and he plays in other bands. And I thought he was just super excellent. He was so excellent. He was like in like 10 bands, you know. But
everybody wants a good drummer, right?
Right, of course, yeah. And when I was 16, we would go. There's a pier near here, Seal Beach Pier, and we would go there. We had like a wagon, so we put all our stuff on the wagon, and we'd take it out on the pier. We'd set up and we'd play like surf rock music, and then we'd make money. So that was like our job. So we'd go out there for a couple hours. Yeah, you know, if it was packed, like I remember there was like a lot of tourists influx seasons, like around summer and stuff. We would make some real money.
You played your own stuff, or
like a lot of covers, like Dick Dale, or like a lot of surf rock tunes, like "Walk Don't Run" by I can't remember the band.
Me neither.
You know what I mean? Like, and
Google it, people.
yeah, like a lot of people like to hear that stuff around here. So it was super successful for us. Like making $80 when you're 16, that's the best, man. So it was like we
music.
Yeah, with music, exactly. So I was like, hey, I'm beating the system, like I'm making I'm making money. But yeah, it was like because we had no bass player. But you know, I think whereas now I kind of figured out a way to make it work. It didn't really work then because we're playing out of a little tiny amp. There's no low ends. Like it sounded pretty thin. It was pretty rough. But at the time, it was super fun, and it was always just like trying to learn new songs, trying to push ourselves, see how many songs we could play, and then the name of the game also was just trying to play and not get shut down by the cops. You know, police would come and they're like, "Hey, you have no permit to do this. You need to get out of here." But then we'd come back, and then you know, sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't. But it was awesome. Like it felt like there was nothing to lose except for to just go and try. And I think also being so young, people see that and they're like, they can't help but give $1, right? Because how could you not, right? So
kids playing,
yeah, exactly, yeah.
Hey, and was your style? Well, it's still evolving probably, but back then, was it all already going towards the thing you're doing now?
Like, no, dude. No? Like, yeah, I think that's the thing that I realized. Like, community shapes your musical journey so much. You like the mug?
This is a really cool mug, but it's very difficult to drink from.
Yeah, sorry. Well, yeah, I mean,
Mario.
Yeah, community is such a big part of developing a musician. You know, another thing I noticed as like a through line for a lot of musicians is like when they really get good, they enter a community. Like Jimi Hendrix was already good, and then he joins the Chitlin circuit, and he's surrounded by all these musicians, and he's learning every day lots of things. I didn't really have that at that point. Like there was a musical kind of scene. So like a lot of kids, we would have shows like in houses or another high school, the one I didn't go to. It was a little bit, I guess, less academically inclined. They would do shows under bleachers, and it was allowed. They actually endorsed it. So we would play there, and it felt like you were playing like a festival because there was like 100 kids. That feels like a lot, you know, at the time. So that was a community, but again, like I didn't feel like I was learning much. So what I was trying to learn was like, okay, how is Hendrix doing this thing? How can I improvise in this blues setting?
So Hendrix was important for you, huh?
Yeah, because I liked him because it mashed this energy, but he also had this virtuosity because I really liked punk music. I loved punk music. I hated how bad they were. Like Ramones, you know, they were like the best of the worst. You know, like they could really play, but just what they could do. You know, you never ever heard a guitar solo. Like, so I liked the songs, but then I wish that there was a bit more musicianship. You know, but then again, that's not really punk, right? But in a similar way, I felt like Hendrix, he has some songs like you listen to Voodoo Child, and the drums are like slamming on that track, like the guitar is wailing.
Yeah.
But he's virtuosic. Or that's not a word. You know what I mean? He's really proficient, and
but that combination of that punky attitude and that craftsmanship, that's what it is.
And he was a bit of a rebel, you know. Like I liked that too. That he was doing, you know, like I love this Hendrix story. I don't know if you've ever heard it, but it starts out a biography that I read of his. I thought it was just a great story that really captures the essence of Hendrix, but. He's with either Noel or Mitch, one of the bassist or drummer, when they go to a bar and they're in the UK. And They're going in, and other dude's white, Hendrix is black. They're going to the bar, and bartender or bouncer, security, whatever, he's like, hey, you guys can't come in. And so Hendrix is thinking like, oh, it's a race thing, but the climate in the UK is actually very different. And the guy points to a sign and it says no circus people because of what they were wearing. It wasn't a race thing, it was an outfit thing. So I think it's this funny little anecdote about just how he was willing to present himself, and that he was really willing to push boundaries, like in a big way, and in a way that's like changed guitar music forever. So I thought that was super cool. But of course, like, there's a zillion Hendrix clones. And that's also what I realized. Like, it's so cool to do this thing. But not only am I not going to be the best, I'm going to be forgotten if I just continue to do this thing. Like, I would love to just, like, get a Strat and just plug it into a Marshall and, like, play Hendrix covers. But nobody would care about me doing that.
But that's an interesting point, though, because maybe... you get to this point and like, oh, you feel something like, this feels good, but your mind also tells you like, oh, you're not gonna.
Well, I was getting bored. Also, it's like Hendrix came out with 3 albums. They're great, but there's only 3 albums, right? And then what are you gonna? You can take it. You can listen to like Lenny Kravitz. He's got that one Hendrix song, or you can listen to like Joe Bonamassa. But it's like at a certain point, it's like, hey guys, we're kind of running out of.
You knew there was more depth to it.
Yeah, and then also I was always an adventurous listener. I didn't mind listening to something new. Like, that's also the thing. It was hard to find people in my youth that were like that as well. Because then you'd meet someone and they were like, yeah, my favorite band is Slayer. And I just listened to Slayer. And then that was good enough for me at one point. But then it's like, hey, man, there's more to life than Slayer. It's good to have a lot of different... And I loved finding a new band and then obsessing over it and learning all the members and what instruments do they play? What are they doing? Like, that was really my fixation. So yeah, I was quick to turn around, especially going into the end of high school. I got really into like indie rock and experimental rock. So I was listening to a lot of, I discovered shoegaze. I thought that was like the coolest new thing. I was like, this is like awesome, like guitar as a soundscape. And yeah, I just go through all these phases, listening to Elliott Smith or around that time, also in this region, there was a big music scene for a label called Burger Records. I would be surprised if you ever heard of it, but they were reviving garage rock. So, we're post Strokes, but we're pre, some things as well. It was like this weird liminal space where they were playing a lot of the bands in that scene. They were like garage rock. It sounds like something from like the 60s or 70s, but I liked that because like hundreds of people would show up, and they did shows where you're staying, like Santa Ana, Orange County. They would do a show in like a record shop, and then it would be full, like you couldn't go in. And that's when I first felt like, oh, this is a scene. This is really, it's not just like kids with nothing to do. They are fans of these bands. These are like real fans. And I got really into that. Like, I was going to shows, and at that point I could drive, and a lot of my friends couldn't. So I would like fill up my car. I had a Prius, which is like, especially for like a teenage guy, that is not a cool car. Very fuel efficient, but fill it all the way up, and we'd like drive to LA. We'd go to like some house or some like rundown venue. They're selling like cheap beer for $1, very much like a teenage show. And we would go, and that was like our weekend activity. So it was very fun. But yeah, if you want to learn more about that, you can look up what happened to them. Unfortunately, not a lot of good things were happening at those shows. I was not a part of those things. I would just listen to the music and leave.
Well, what happened then?
A lot of illegal, let's say, sexual crimes. Maybe you can look it up.
Okay, yeah, makes me intrigued.
Yeah, well, teenage. You have a teenage crowd, and then some guys that are in their 30s who are not teenagers, and yeah, maybe some things that shouldn't have been happening. Okay, but it felt really cool. And dude, there was one time I went to a show, and I see these like 3 guys, and they're all hanging out, and they're all hanging out by themselves, and they didn't really look like everyone else there. Everyone else there had like kind of, like Dickies, like work clothes. They're trying to look like as low class as possible, if that makes sense. Like wearing clothes that are too big, like smoking cigarettes, whatever. Like they're trying to look like a certain way. And these guys looked like rappers. They didn't look like everyone else. You know what I mean? And I was like, who are those guys? Why are they here? Like this, everyone else seems like on their own. And it was Tyler, the Creator, who's like very, very, very popular hip hop artist. And he was just there because he was like, oh, this is like a very happening thing right now. I need to see. And he would like take some of those artists and put them on his record. And, and so it felt like that was the first time too, where I was like, oh, I saw someone famous. Because in Long Beach, there's not, here you have like Sublime, biggest band out of Long Beach, hands down. And then like there's a couple local legend bands, but it's really a bubble. And also for music, for me, that was tough because I was like, oh, I don't have like the uncle who went on tour. I don't have, you know, my dad didn't play music. He couldn't play anything, couldn't do anything. So I didn't have that connection. So when I started to really venture out into LA, that's when I was like, oh, wow, this feels really cool to me. You know what I mean?
But by that time, you must have, it sounds like you had all the ingredients there to go and form your own style.
Yeah. Oh, I think I was like a mix of everything I was listening to. So like my last band in high school, we were like indie, but we also had like punk, you know, so it was a mixture of all that. And that was like the first time that I think we actually got somewhere with anything. There was a couple like local festivals, so we got paid to do those. And I was like, wow, this is great. And then the Long Beach airport started playing Long Beach only artists. So then we were played at the airport, you know, and then I got a email from a licensing company, and they said, hey, like Hollister, you know, is a clothing brand here. They want to license your track to play in their stores. So we'll pay you like a royalty. So I wasn't making serious money, but by the time I was exiting high school, I was getting a couple $100 every month, you know, maybe like $1,000 a month from music.
But were you back then already thinking, I just have to go into music? This is going to be, no?
I was terrified. Okay. I was so scared because I didn't have enough yet. Like it's fun when you're hanging around town with your mom's car and, you know, you're making like a little bit, but I was like, dude, I can't make a living off of this. Because it's all fun and games when you don't have to pay rent, you don't have to do.
Was there any alternative plan knocking in your
So
mind?
I had gotten accepted to San Francisco State University, and I thought it would be really good to get away from all of this because I felt like I had met everybody I needed to meet. I had played at all the venues here that would allow me, you know. The next step either was break into the LA scene, but then I'm still living with my mom, you know, and then she's going to be just very like, okay, what are you doing? You know, I didn't feel like I had like the space there to kind of grow and just be my own person. Or I could go out of state, or I could, you know, go to San Francisco State. So I felt like a good compromise. Like I could still be close to home, but I could also explore this new city. Maybe there's like new scene there.
So and what direction were you going to study?
I was going to be a business major.
Oh, wow. Okay.
No, sorry.
Give me some time to process this.
No, sorry. I first was a political science major. I didn't even know what that meant. I still don't really know what it means.
Political science. Well, science in politics, well, it went away a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Recent events.
Yes, sorry.
It was very interesting at the time. I did actually really enjoy some of those classes, but I spent all day. I was like, yes, I can play guitar all day. And that was the best. So, also one other formative thing, I think right before I left for San Francisco State, I had graduated high school and I was preparing to leave. You know, I had already gotten Spotify, and Spotify had like a proto kind of radio. They didn't really have radio, but they had similar artists. So I would just go through and like listen to all of them and then just go and find new and just rinse and repeat. So I found an artist, a band called Terramellos.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you're familiar?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was... So I had downloaded that record and I was flying back from New York. All my family's in New York, really. And we were flying back and I was listening to their most recent album at the time, X'd Out. And I was like, whoa, this is nuts. And the guitar was like all over the place, time signatures all over the place, and it just really flicked a switch. And I was like, this band is awesome. And I just every band that I liked at the time, I went and liked them on Facebook just so I could show that I liked them, but also like it's cool, like, oh, Marcos likes all these bands, but also I wanted to see what they're doing. So I go on there, I'm liking the page, and the first post is, hey, it's Nick here. If you want a guitar lesson, email me. I hadn't taken guitar lessons in like 4 years. I had been all self-taught. And there was definitely some definitely some holes in what I was doing. Like I tried learning like Cliffs of Dover.
Yeah.
And I was like, I could kind of play it, but it was like I just needed like a little. I needed a teacher to kind of get it really sounding like good.
Mm.
And I saw that, and I was like, I think this is the move, because I looked them up. I was like, they had been on a label. I was like, I need someone who's like in the industry. Just even, I want to learn guitar, but I need I need to talk to someone about this.
It's actually interesting. Like, okay, I can kind of play Cliffs of Dover, but how does a teacher make you be able to play that?
So I found the video that I recorded, and it's like, it's pretty good, but the timing is a little all over the place.
Oh yeah.
And then the articulation. So it's like it's like that close to being like a professional.
And so you needed somebody who could pinpoint. That's it. Or
I could only just do so much on my own. I think I needed someone to help me.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know if he could help me or not, but I was like, okay, I think I need to go and meet with this guy. It just sounds like the right thing to do. So I told my mom too. I was like, yeah, like I think if I meet with this guy, it could really help with this and that. So she agreed. The rate wasn't very bad, actually. I think at the time it was like $50 for a lesson. So all I had to do was drive to Alhambra, which is like from here. It was like 50 minutes each way, but I was like, I'll do it. I'll drive there. And we met in like a rundown art studio. And he said it was his friends. Like he didn't want to teach out of his house, which is understandable. Like I'm just
so the businessman in you started saying, hey, this is not a good career option, this.
No, I didn't. Well, I hadn't formed a thought. I was just so excited because I had listened to his album and I thought it was so good. And I was like, so I sat down with Nick Reinhardt, who was the guitar player and kind of the mastermind of the band. And he's like, yeah, so you're like a new fan, huh? And I'm like, well, I'm not like your biggest fan, but I am a fan. Like, I think when I was a fan of a band, I knew everything about them. I didn't know very much about this band. So I was a little, like, I was like, okay, I wonder if I'm going to learn something or he's just going to. So I was a bit concerned at first, but he's like, yeah, like what song did you like? And so I was like, I like the title, the first track. He's like, let me show you. And it's like a riff in 5/4, and it's like, and it's really can be played with one hand. That was also a unique concept to me. I was like, oh, you can play, like, obviously you can do the Eddie Van Halen, and then like, you could do some basic pull-offs, but he's playing power chords with one hand, pulling off.
I now only realize you have really long fingers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my mom, she would always tell me, she's like, he was born to be a piano player. Long fingers. I didn't play piano.
Or a
right?
tapping guitarist.
But, I learned this riff, and then he's like, yeah, let's do it next week. We'll come back, and I practiced every week. That was the first time that when I met,
you had a goal.
Yeah, well, I had tutors in high school. They were like trying to get me to pass. They're like, dude, you gotta like remember this information. I just could not do it. And I always met with people every week for something or another. Like if it was like one extracurricular or another or whatever, I never felt inclined to go home. I was like, okay, that's the time that I do that. I like, obviously, like maybe, I don't know if you've taught guitar, but like if I ever teach guitar, if I teach a rare time that I've taught like a kid, that's how it is. They don't really practice outside of the.
Depends if somebody's passionate, right?
Right, but I practiced like the fuck out of that riff. I was like, I'm going to be like the best at this riff. And
that must have been very satisfying for him as well, right? As a teacher, that's great.
Well, it was awesome because, because we started with that riff and then he's like, okay, let's learn some other riffs. So he was showing me all of his riffs. But what I realized is like, I'm just learning his songs. So I'm basically like what I wanted to learn other things. I was like, okay, so when you have this major 7 chord, how does this tie into this other chord? And he's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
He's like, I never think about that when I write. And I was like, oh, okay, interesting. So I was both like satisfied and unsatisfied at the same time.
Yeah. Maybe it is a good answer though, because if you would have said it has to be this, which is the opposite of the answer that
Correct,
he gave.
Yeah.
The other option is more
tunnel vision,
open, right?
Yeah. I agree with you. Yeah. And then at the same time, I would learn a song and then he'd be like, have you ever heard of King Crimson? And I'm like, no. And he's like, you got to listen to this record. And he'd show me this record. And then he's like, oh, you know what? I think you'd really like This Town Needs Guns. And I was like, who's that? And he's like, check them out. They're also on this label I'm on, Sargent House. So I felt like in a way it was like a Big Brother session where I'd go there, I'd get some music recommendations, I'd learn a riff or two, And
it
then
seems like a very pivotal moment, right?
for me, I think as far as like why you're here and why you're interested in me, this is, all the other stuff is probably just formative, but this is really where I was like, okay, there's guitar tapping. We've got like all this other, time signature. And then I'm looking up like, what's math rock? What's this? So I'm starting to find these bands and I'm like, this is awesome. Like, this is so cool because this is like experimentation in real time. It's like jazz, but without the improvisation. It's like rock, but without the, some of the things that I found at the time, like so silly, like the dad rock part of it, or like the glam, and it's even like metal in some ways, but without the burliness. Like they don't care that if it gets heavy. Like when you listen to Hella or Don Caballero, for instance, like those are math rock bands that I discovered too, and they're shredding just as hard as Slayer, but there's no pretentiousness. It's just guys that are just wailing, but there's not a lot of oh, we're big and tough and we worship Satan, and like there's no facade. It was real, and I was like, this is what I need right now. So I was like super into that, and I spent a whole year at San Francisco State. I was like, anyone I could find, I was like, dude, you got to check out this math rock thing. This is awesome. And I formed another 2-piece there, so it was another drummer guitar duo. So it was like the second iteration, and the drummer was just like a friend of a friend, and he could like kind of hold a beat, but he wasn't really like as interested in. He was more just like, oh yeah, I like music and like I want to play music, but he wasn't like as obsessive as I was about it. So he would just kind of back me up and while I play my riffs.
But it's not going to work for the long run, right? That way.
Yeah, a lot of things weren't working there. Like I realized I thought San Francisco was like this super, like I thought like Grateful Dead, like I had no clue. Like it was turning into this tech metropolis. Like it's like now that's where tech people live. It's and that's where $100,000 a year is poverty. Like I had no clue. So I'm going to class and I'm exploring the city and I'm like, yeah, there's cool stuff, but it just felt like this shrinking. Oh,
little fly. not the first time.
We usually don't get those. I hope that people don't think I live in a.
No, I had this with a Harry Valentino, High Fate. You know them? Oh, they're a great band.
Okay, I'll check it out.
And there was a fly bugging us the
whole
interview. Yeah.
Okay, hopefully it was in a similar location. Anyway, my insecurity aside.
Sorry, fly.
No, it's all good. No, but like, living in San Francisco was so cool, but also so terrifying because it felt like the shrinking art scene. Everything is shrinking. Like, you go and play at a show or something, and it's like tiny stage, tiny place. Like you're not getting paid. Like that's how it felt. It felt very claustrophobic, and there were some cool shows. There was this place called the Honey Hive. It's like kind of like a hole in the wall, and that was like one place that I was like, okay, this is a cool spot, like maybe I can play here, and they've closed like in the last couple of years, and it's like my suspicion, how my intuition was, it was kind of right. Like everything there is just shrinking. It's kind of, and everyone was kind of moving over to Oakland and Berkeley, just like across the bay. And I was doing just as terribly in school, not at all interested or engaged, straight up just failing classes. I would wake up at like noon, 11 o'clock. It was very unlike me. I would just be up all night. I would just like hang out with like my roommates or just like people, and we would just do like just wasting time. Yeah, I mean, it's like that's kind of like a college thing. But it was fun, but I was also thinking like, what am I gonna be doing in like 5 years? Like what is this gonna amount to? Because I was having a blast. Like I was just like, okay, I can do whatever. And I think that's like a typical college thing. You're just figuring yourself out. You're living on your own for the first time.
That's part of the lesson, right?
Yeah. And but it was great for me because all the while, like my musical everything was just expanding, like growing. Like I was learning, practicing, and I got really into this. Like I got really obsessed with this like 10,000 hours idea. It was very unhealthy looking back on it, but I was like, if I practice... Did
you really count the hours?
I was counting. It was very unhealthy. Like 3 to 4 hours a day, I figured in 3 years I would be good. I just felt, and that's like going back to the beginning of the conversation, the numbers goal.
Oh yeah.
Right? It's complete waste of time. But I was at least motivated to keep going and keep learning. Like I was, even though it was stupid, the numbers thing, the time was not stupid.
But it seems to be throughout the interesting battle the whole time with the head and the gut the whole time, right? What should I do and what do I want to do?
Yeah.
And like, does that
Oh, totally.
You relate to that?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I was experiencing in real time.
Yeah.
But after like 8 months there, I was like, yeah, I got to get out of here. Like, this is not going to end well for me. This is not going to amount to anything. Like, I'm going to be in a bad spot.
So you went back here?
I went back here. Yeah. So after a year, I came back, and, my mom is kind of like, well, you're back, no degree. So you can go to school or you can pay rent. You can pay rent to live here.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, I'll go to school. No problem. And so we were kind of just like, what do we do? Because it was such a last minute thing that I had decided. So she was like, well, you can go to community college, which is just kind of like it's a little bit of a lower study, and you can get a degree there in 2 years. So with the credits I had already accumulated, I could get a beginning degree, like you call it associate's degree.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, we can get this degree and then you can figure it out. You can buy some time, basically. So I went to Orange Coast Community College, which is actually also where you are now, Orange County. So it was right around there. And I did business, and that was also equally miserable. But I just kept doing.
That's a good motivator, man, to go the other direction, right?
But I was doing the same exact thing, just finding new bands. And I was making new friends also, in Long Beach, just hanging out with different people and just kind of getting in, kind of more of the same, like how I'd been doing, just finding new bands, getting inside the heads of different people, like meeting up with local people and just trying to see like what could be done. I was getting way more desperate though. Like I was going on Craigslist and just like, anybody, can I please find a band like that I can be in? Like, can I just like take?
Because Standards wasn't.
No, we're not a thing. We're getting there. We're getting there.
Yeah, almost, because you said
is this too long? How long?
No, yeah. Well, this is it's almost an hour.
Oh my God.
We're going.
Sorry.
No worries. I just realized it, but we're going towards the end.
You can condense it.
Maybe make a 2-part episode out of this.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No worries, man.
Okay. All right, let me just try to. I'll try to streamline.
No,
it's
not you. It's me. I should be in charge, man. But
sorry.
Just
I spent. Just cut a lot of the earlier stuff out. It's not important. But no, I was just so desperate to get in a band. I was just meeting up with people on Craigslist. Like, just in 5 minutes, I'd be like, "Are you down to like just make this your life? Like, are you?"
I am desperate.
Yeah, I was desperate. I felt like like a 50-year-old widow, like last call saloon. Like, it was just like, dude, I need to get out of this situation. And around the time, like a friend of a friend was like, "Hey, do you want to audition for this band? It's getting started." It's the manager of My Chemical Romance. He's attached to this group, and it's going to be this like alternative rock band. And the goal is to tour. The goal is to make it big, basically. So I went in and auditioned, and I figured there'd be like a bunch of other people there. It was just me.
Oh,
and it was so stock. It was just like power chords, and I was just like, what is this? This is not like, this is super chill, And I go in there, and we just they had sent me the songs. I played all songs, and they're like, cool, you're in the band. I was like 19, and I was like, okay, so what is this really? Like, what's going on? They're like, so basically we're managed by this guy. Like, he used to manage My Chemical Romance. Like, yeah, the goal is to tour. And we're going to rehearse like 3 times a week. We're going to do a bunch of shows around here. And then we're going to get hopefully pitched for tours.
Yeah.
And so when that happens, you need to drop out of school. So we're going to be full time. And I was like, let's go. Like, this is my moment. This is great. And the drummer was 18. So I felt like we were like in a similar, like, yeah, we're going to be in our 20s soon. Like, we're going to be like touring. This is like our in the industry.
Yeah.
And like, so I'd go to Orange Coast Community College. I would take my classes. I would get in the car. I'd drive an hour and a half, Hollywood, rehearse, come home. And that was like my life, like for like weeks and stuff. And, I was also at the same time just like thinking like, what's my next move? What am I going to do? And so I'm doing this for like almost 3 months. And some part of me is also gut feeling like, I don't think this is going to work out. First of all, I didn't like the music. I thought it was bad. I thought it was bad music. And a lot of the things they would say, it just felt like, and this is the first of like the intuition that I would get. You probably would get this at NAMM too. It's like industry talk. People like to name drop. They like to puff themselves up like, oh yeah, I know so-and-so person and I was at their house. And, some of it might be true, but they might be overestimating what is actually going on. Because in reality, if you are who you say you are, you don't need to say much. Paul McCartney doesn't have to go in a room and say, "Oh, did you know that I was the number one?" Blah, blah, blah. He doesn't have to do that. Yeah. And that's all it was. It was like puff piece after puff piece every week. Oh yeah, we're working on this album at this place, and we're doing this, and we're gonna go do this. And then I just didn't feel like any of it was coming together. And I didn't know anything about the industry at the time, but I was like, man, I think I'm getting taken for a ride here because I'm not getting paid. I'm spending all my spare money on gas just to go to college, go all around. Yeah. I'm like going in circles here, like all the while my mom is kind of just like, hey, like, are you going to stay at Orange Coast? Like, what's your plan here? Because I see you spending a lot of time on this music thing. I don't really see a lot happening. And I'm just feeling like a lot of pressure. So I start thinking like, what if I just go to music school? What if I just say like stop living this double life, just go all in, just be around it all the time, figure something out, you know? And I auditioned for a couple schools. The one that I was really looking at was California Institute of the Arts, which is like 60 miles north of here. So it's like just when you leave LA, it's right at the edge of town. It's a school that it was like an idea from Walt Disney. He had this idea to train artists, and that the school would actually be kind of designed kind of like Disneyland, where you have like a different section of each park. Similarly, it would be like there's a music area, and then there's like a dance area, and then there's painting, and then so you would have all these different things. I liked that idea also because I could be close to home. Like the other idea was Berkeley School of Music, but that's in Boston, so it's 6.5 hours on the plane every time, cold.
You have the Musicians Institute here as well, right?
Yeah, but you know that's not a good school.
I talked to a teacher there yesterday.
Oh yeah,
Alan Hines. He's a teacher there. So
okay,
Anyway,
I had friends that were going there or had gone there, and they did not give me very much confidence. Also, very expensive. So that was like a factor.
Oh, yeah.
But as you know, I'm like, I feel like I was fighting a war on all fronts. It's like, okay, I got to keep my mom happy. I got to keep the family happy. You got to keep going to school. Then I'm auditioning for this school, which is pissing off the band because they were like, why are you auditioning for school if we're going to go on tour? And I kept being like, yeah, we're going on tour. Like, you know, like what's this? You know.
So what made you really decide now I'm going to have to make myself happy?
When I turned in my audition, and it felt like the culmination of everything. So I had done like a John Mayer song, kind of felt like a bit of that Hendrixy, you know, bluesy thing. I did some Tremolos, like of course I learned that. I did Mars Volta, so I felt like I was like doing my own. I had taught myself like a lot of those songs, and so it felt like the culmination of like, this is me right now. And I got in, and I was like, I got into the guitar program too, which was, you know, there were a lot of programs that were a bit more like accepting, but this one had a very slim acceptance rate. And they were totally happy to have me.
Oh wow.
So I started in 2017, like the beginning of 2017. So still doing the band, started going to CalArts, and that was like the biggest transformation because for the first time I felt like I was like actually in my element. Everyday music, like theory, we're doing all sorts of, and it is definitely a more experimental school like than Berkeley. So there's no culture there's no industry analysis. There's no I don't know.
Yeah, no, I wanted to ask, what's the main thing you learned there?
Guitar. I was a guitar performance major,
but more as a theme, so to say, like
experimentation. I think that was the biggest. A lot of the teachers that taught there, they were very much into experimental music, and I was learning about things that just every day I was getting my mind blown. Like just like we were learning atonal, we were learning, you know, like Shepard's tone, like kind of really experimental, really experimental stuff. So I was totally in my element, and it was around that time that I was like, yeah, I'm gonna leave this band. Because they had taken me out on the weekends. Like I was working every day there. I was like studying every day, and I was like, I need to be good at this. And they had taken my weekend. We had gone and done like some photo shoot, and the manager had actually shown up. He never really came to rehearsals or anything. Like he took us out, and he's like, yeah, we have to get the right look. You know, they had bought clothing for me. It felt like so artificial. And then again, like this is not who I am as a person. But of course I just wanted my in, and talking to this guy, I was like, is this really the guy? Like he's like hanging out there, just like giving us orders, and he like brought guns, and he was just like playing with them. Like we were out in the desert. It was just felt like this really, I was like, I do not feel comfortable right now. And we went to this beachside. It's called the Salton Sea, way out there in the desert in California. And it's called that because the sea is literally salt. All the fish, there's like fish carcasses everywhere, like dead bones. And we went there and we're going to do this like rugged photo shoot. Like we're going to look like this, like too cool to be in society band. And we drive onto the beach and there's two vans. Like one is crew. So it's like, photographer. And I was like, oh, they have like hired this whole team. They get stuck and we get stuck in the sand. And I was just like, this is the perfect example of how I feel about this. Like, this just does not work.
Yeah.
And like the next week, I just quit. And I was like, I'm not going to be sitting out on some beach, like stuck. Like, this is ridiculous. So.
But, okay, tell me how standard.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
No. But did it form when you were in CalArts?
Yeah. So I went all in on this idea of like just being myself, but also I wanted to be employable. So I was doing session work in LA. So I would get hired by, because that led to another opportunity. And like, I would basically just keep getting referred for gigs. Oh, yeah. And the best part is I didn't charge a lot. I charged because I was like 19 years old. Yeah. So I played a lot of gigs. Like, I think I was just constantly busy. So going to school, playing these gigs, and then in between I would be playing with classmates. So again, like still very much into math rock. And I went to a very awesome show that summer in 2017. It was Chon with Terramellos. Oh, yeah. So I felt very full circle to me. And Covet, who at the time had Forrest Rice playing drums, who's now my drummer. Yeah. And Little Tybee, who had Josh Martin on guitar, and I also took lessons from him. So it was like a very formidable show where like every act I felt like I had some...
But must have felt like coming home.
Yeah, but it also felt like something so far away, like I didn't know anybody who did this kind of thing, Yeah. So then I realized like I just have to find those people. So I would go on these like math rock groups on Facebook and be like, hey, does anyone want to make a band with me? And I was used to two pieces already. So I was like, I just need a drummer. Just get me in a room with a drummer and I started feeling inspired to write kind of math rock music. So I was going in Guitar Pro and I was like writing something and I was like, oh, I can't play it, but I'm sure I could teach it to myself, So I'm like just getting really inspired. And I would like post on, a riff on Instagram. And that was the first time people were like actually interested in what I was posting. So I would post like whatever those covers but I would get like, 10, 20 likes. And nobody really cared. But then I would start posting it and people were like, oh, this guy's like, but it felt like years of work in the making. Like it was not like I just snapped my fingers. And so I found the first drummer of Standards, Jacob, and him and I were more like 50-50 partners. So this was like equal creative opportunity. And so we met up around CalArts. We would like there were a lot of like student led kind of apartments, and so they had like it was out kind of in the wilderness. So there was like a lot of like big houses with it's not as typical, I guess, here in the city, like that you would have like a garage, and like some places don't have this sort of thing, but there they did. So we would just meet up in like these garages or houses that we were renting at the time, and we would just jam and just play some stuff. And that's what we would do for the rest of 2017.
But 50-50 didn't work for you?
No, it did. I was because I was also very young. I was 20 years old and Jacob was 25. So he was pursuing his master's degree. I was still pursuing my first degree, my bachelor's degree. So I was learning from him. He was teaching. He's like, here, let's try this metric modulation. I'm like, I don't know what that is. So he's teaching me. And then he's like, oh, do you know Tigran Amassian? Do you know these? He's also a bit of a jazz guy. So I'm learning, okay, this is, and then, we're going back. I felt also like a bit of a mentorship, and he had also been on tour. That was a big thing. He had a solo drum project and he made his own merch. He was also DIY in that way that he would find, he would buy shirts at the store and then have a person from school screen print on them. So I was like, oh, dude, this is like the perfect guy. Like he's doing DIY stuff. He's doing like all this. And I was like, wow, this is awesome. And so I felt like there was potential for this. But months went by and like we're also doing other projects. So we were both very, very busy. I was doing this other thing with the singer-songwriter at the time, and same thing. She was like, "Oh, I got interest from this label and this label." So, my priorities are all over the place. It was hard to pin down that this was going to be something that I was going to do. I really enjoyed it though, but of course, at the end of the day, like I'm going to this school. Like I want to make something of myself. Wasn't going to hinge my bets on it. And Jacob had expressed also some doubt to me. He's like, hey, I have this tour with this jazz guy. We're going to go to Europe, so I'm going to put Standards on hold, and I'm not so sure like if I want to keep doing it at all. So we played like maybe 1 or 2 shows from when we started, and everyone just looked very, very confused. They were like, what is this, man? Like,
is that a good thing? Maybe.
Yeah. And all the songs we played around the time, it's on the first EP. And there's a track on Fruit Island, the last one, called What You Aren't. That was the first song we ever played together.
Oh, yeah.
So I re-recorded it for Fruit Island with another friend of mine, Brody. And I think that's like the very much like, if you want to hear that early stuff, that's the time. That was kind of the sound of the time. And that's when I started also like splitting my guitar signals. So I would have like half of it go into a Boss OC3, and that would go into a bass amp, and then the other half would go into the guitar amp. Oh, yeah. So that was the beginning of that sort of thing. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I'm also curious, because in the beginning I said you play complex stuff, right? But there's also humor, the way you present yourself.
Yeah.
So when did that enter Standards?
I think it was the Fruit thing. Yeah. So like when we only put out one song, and that one was we recorded it kind of like at the school studio. It didn't sound great. Like I tried to mix it or whatever. Some people liked it. I was posting a lot on these things, but then we had, some renewed interest because of Facebook groups. So Jacob's like, you know what, I'll hang in there. Let's try to make this a project, because we almost called it quits just from the infancy, and we decided we're going to record this EP. So I think that was around the time where we started getting into the Fruit thing, getting a little bit more humorous, because we started with the Fruit thing because we didn't really know what to do. Like, we're an instrumental band. Like, what are we going to do? So Jacob was the one who came up with this idea of like fruits kind of like floating around the Standards logo, and around the same time, we were also just like meeting up for rehearsal. And then we realized like the biggest way to get more fans was just to make online content.
Yeah.
And especially targeted at like Facebook appreciation groups for like math rock, prog rock, whatever. So we would just come up with these ideas. Like, at the time, like the rehearsal spot that we had also is very colorful. So, yes. That was very eye-popping. But then he had bought this like Hello Kitty drum set. So he's like, I'm going to play on this thing. So he would play on that, and then I would be playing in that video. Like, I'm not sure if you'd say viral, but it got way more attention than anything I'd ever done. Yeah. And at that time, I was like, oh, dude, I need to quit everything else I'm doing. This is it, and it's what I liked the most too. So it was like a double win. But it was like stuff like that. Like, we played in Jacob's bathroom. We made a video, and we called it Bath Rock. Oh, yeah. And people loved that. They were like, "Oh, this band is hilarious."
There's one video it's from later on that made me really laugh out loud when you were programming the drums, and you were programming Impossible to play drum fill, right?
So we were actually working that day. We were working on a new song, which is not released, but we're kind of writing some stuff.
Yeah.
So I thought, hey, you're here. Let's make like a quick video. Like I'll write some crazy part. And Forrest is sitting on the couch, and I'm just copying like this crazy pattern and doubling it. And
it goes something like, right?
But that's me too. Like, I was always like that. I was always a bit, maybe a little, sometimes a bit like too much, but like very silly, and like almost in like you can't take this guy seriously at all way. And that was also something that I didn't know like where that was, but we put that into the music, and is also, I think, you can't only do that. You also have to come up with music that people like.
Yeah,
right?
Of course.
You can't be
just
too much of a gimmick.
No,
so
but
you have to have them walk hand in hand, right?
Yeah. And so you came until a point that we're now.
Yeah.
I saw you guys play last year in Europe.
Yeah, awesome.
So what about the upcoming year? What's going to happen? You guess?
So this year we're gonna tour with RX Bandits, is like band also from Long Beach, coincidentally, and that's gonna be really exciting because they have like very big rooms booked, and I think it's gonna be like a really good tour for us, because I think now we're at a point where, at least in terms of the community that we started in, I think we're very well known. And I think it's time to try to branch out and get into, and we've been doing that. We've been trying to do crossover stuff. And also the festival you saw us, it was just a guitar festival. It wasn't really a progressive music festival. Yeah. And yeah, we didn't really have like a big splash there, but there was other times where we did have.
I hopped onto my bicycle. I saw Matteo Mancuso.
Yeah.
And then you were playing at the same time.
Yeah,
so
I know.
After he finished, I ran.
That's
towards your concert.
That's kind of what I figured. It's just a little too close to call. Like, but it was super fun, and we're gonna do like a very exciting couple of tours. I can't really say too much, but this year also. Okay. Yeah,
we'll have to find out.
Yeah, very fun. Yeah,
I think I might we'll make a 2 episode out of this.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. We
no.
So
don't
long.
apologize, man, because I really like talking to you. I hope people who heard this and haven't heard of your music, that they will go and listen, because it's another...
I guess I wish I talked more about that. I talked too much about
the school system. I'm wrapping up. If we're going to do 2 episodes, what did you want to say then that you haven't said then? That's maybe a very stupid question.
No, I guess I didn't talk so much about what we've been doing lately, or just kind of like the history of the band. But I guess it is about me, whatever.
Yeah, right. About how you got here. I mean, I find it interesting battle, like I said before, of what you thought you were supposed to do and what you wanted to do, what you could do.
I guess if I could sum it up well, it would be, I think that Standards is now me accepting myself for who I am, not trying to fit in any boxes, because I think that's what the music industry tries to do. You have to fit in a box perfectly. Mm-hmm. If you're hired by somebody else, you have to, look a certain way, you have to play a certain way. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a culmination now of me. Also sometimes I feel like I don't even fit in with like other, like we toured with Pliny last year, 2 years ago, but it was last year in 2024, and it was awesome experience. But it also felt like we didn't fit. You know what I mean? Like we're really our own thing.
Standards is not standard.
Well, I think it's just I realize I don't mind it so much. I think it's better to just be yourself and do what you need to do, and it's better than trying to. I think also in guitar community, like there's so many guitarists. Like I think one of my teachers said that, like, from what he researched, or he found this somewhere, that like about 1 billion people can play guitar. They can figure something out.
Wow.
Not that play consistently, but if you handed them a guitar, they could play a chord. And I believe that to be true. Yeah. Like almost 1/9 of the world's population can play the guitar in some degree.
Yeah.
I agree. I think that makes sense, actually.
That's a lot of notes.
But there's so many guitarists, and it's really hard to stand out, but it's also really easy to fit in. It's really easy to fit in a box. You just buy some gear that someone else uses, you learn what they do. And
but it's an intriguing instrument, though, because if all those billions of people, like, every time something different happens, right?
Yeah. Or it should, but sometimes it really doesn't, right? Like,
yeah, but that's also something, right?
Yeah.
I mean, with what I mentioned, Matteo Mancuso, he's obviously very talented.
Yeah.
Right? And from when he was very young, he felt like, okay, I have talent for this.
For sure.
So that's interesting, right? Like that happens with that guy, and some other kid, he's horrible, maybe. That can happen as well, and that's the intriguing thing. Like it's in a way a mirror of like you said, like, who am I? And the guitar will reflect that at one point, I guess.
Or maybe and I think that's kind of what I struggled with the most, was just trying to accept myself. And I think that's like Standards is the gradual process of me doing that and feeling like, because even our first record, like there's some people I see online, and that's also like kind of tying into what you're saying about that what I wrote or whatever. You do see things sometimes, and I think every band gets this, where it's like, oh, I miss this era. Yeah. I miss and I still see some of those comments like, oh, they were their best in their first record.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, hey, I wasn't really myself then. I was still really much inspired by all those bands we talked about. And like, you hear the very much similarity. And now it's like, okay, now I feel like I'm really only now, after years and over a decade of work, do I feel like I'm now doing something that I'm like, okay, this is really me. This is something that I feel like is really me. You know what I mean? So it's hard. Like,
I can imagine it comes with a lot of insecurities, because if you say, okay, this is really me, and you still put it on a platform, right?
Yeah.
And the whole world is able to see you.
Yeah.
and maybe will say something, right?
Yeah.
And that's it's great and scary.
Yeah, and that's where the doubt comes from. But I think at the end of the day, like, especially through this conversation, it makes me even realize more. I've always done the same thing. I've always just find out new bands, find new things to inspire me, add it to my mental collection and my creativity, and just keep going. Like, I never stopped. I never took a break. I never said this isn't for me. I never stopped. And that's just, I don't know how else to be. So I think that's the most important thing, is like being yourself, continuing to be yourself, and continuing to just do it because you love it, And we didn't also talk about touring and industry stuff, but there's a lot of stuff in that way that it'll definitely put you down,
But I think that the thing you just mentioned, that's a much better ending, I guess, to this conversation
100%.
than going towards that other
100%
part.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course, man.
Marcus.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Yeah, and drinking out of the Mario mug.
Cheers, everybody. And listeners, also thanks for listening.
Yeah.